They tried to buy our love, she refused, and justice caught up. I still remember the day like it was yesterday, even though it's been months now. The way the morning sunlight hit my dorm room, golden and soft, completely at odds with the storm that was about to hit my life. I was sipping a cup of coffee, scrolling through my emails, when one subject line made me freeze. Request for urgent meeting Charles Harper. For context, Evelyn Harper was my girlfriend, the girl everyone seemed to either envy or underestimate. She was brilliant, stubborn, and had this effortless elegance that made you feel like you were always slightly out of your league. Her parents were, well, let's just say they were a force of nature. Charles, her father, a man whose presence could make a room tense, and Margaret, her mother, who wielded influence with a silk-gloved iron fist. Meeting them wasn't exactly a casual thing. I hesitated for a moment, staring at the email like staring at the sun might burn your eyes. Should I ignore it? Could I? Of course not. Evelyn had a way of finding out everything, instantly, so avoidance wasn't an option. I took a deep breath, muttered a, "Here goes nothing," and headed out. The Harper estate wasn't far from campus, but it might as well have been in another world. Their house was pristine, intimidatingly so. The kind of place that smelled faintly of expensive wood and something else I couldn't name. Power, maybe. Evelyn opened the door herself, smiling as if nothing in the world could touch her. I followed her down a hallway that looked more like a museum than a home until we reached a study where Charles and Margaret were waiting. "Liam," Charles said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Thank you for coming." Margaret gave me a tight-lipped smile. "Please, have a seat." I did. My stomach churned. There was a easy weight in the air, a sense that whatever happened next could change everything. And then Charles Harper leaned forward, steepling his fingers like some villain from a movie, and said words I still can't shake. "We need to discuss your relationship with Evelyn." I nodded, unsure if nodding was enough. Margaret continued, her voice soft but carrying an edge that made me shiver. "We're going to be very direct, Liam. You're a fine young man, talented and ambitious, and we want the best for you. And we believe we can offer you something that will change your future." And then came the bombshell. Charles's gaze was sharp, calculating. "Leave Evelyn. Walk away from this relationship, and we will cover your entire college tuition. Every cent, every semester, guaranteed." I blinked. I laughed nervously. You're serious?" Charles didn't smile. "Deadly serious. And if Evelyn chooses to end the relationship herself, she'll gain early access to her trust fund. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement." I froze. The room felt like it shrank around me. My entire life, my plans, my freedom, basically everything I had fought to achieve was suddenly dangling in front of me like a carrot I wasn't sure I wanted. I felt a tug at my gut, not just because of the money, but because of what it represented. Freedom from the constant stress of loans, bills, the grind of campus life. And yet, Evelyn, she was sitting across from me, arms crossed, eyes narrowing, not angry, not afraid, just resolute. She had that look in her eyes that told me, "I've already made my choice. Do you have yours?" I swallowed hard. My heart raced. I had a decision to make, and it felt like the wrong answer would echo through the rest of my life. "Liam," Margaret said, leaning forward, "we're offering you a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Think of your future. Think of everything this could give you." I felt the words tug at me. The numbers, the freedom. It made sense. Every logical part of me wanted to say yes. But the other part, the part that loved Evelyn, was screaming no. Before I could even respond, Evelyn stood. She moved with a grace that made the tension in the room palpable. "I'm not for sale," she said, her voice calm but unyielding, carrying the kind of certainty that could make mountains move. She ripped the papers, trust fund documents, parental manipulations, all of it, into confetti. They fluttered around her like snow, and I swear even the room seemed to pause for a moment. Charles's jaw tightened. Margaret's eyes flashed, but Evelyn didn't flinch. She turned to me, her gaze steady, unwavering. "I didn't ask for your money. I didn't ask for your approval. I asked for love. If it's conditional, it's not love." The air was electric. I felt paralyzed. I wanted to speak. I wanted to defend her. I wanted to protest. And yet, all I could do was stay silent, because anything I said would fall short. Anything I said would be the wrong word. And there it was. The choice I never wanted to face, staring me in the eyes. My future, my ambitions, my freedom versus Evelyn's principles, her integrity, and of course, her. And for a long time, I stayed silent. The room shifted. Papers still drifted to the floor. Evelyn stood tall, almost radiant, as if she had become untouchable. Charles and Margaret were silent, stunned, like they hadn't expected resistance. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about me or money. It was about Evelyn, about the kind of person she was, the kind of love she believed in. I left that room without a word. Part of me wanted to collapse. Part of me wanted to cheer, and part of me knew, deep down, that my life had just taken a turn I couldn't have predicted. Walking back to campus, I felt the weight of silence pressing on me. What do you do when someone you love shows you the kind of courage you wish you had? Do you rise to the occasion, or do you let fear dictate your choices? I didn't have the answer yet, but one thing was clear. Evelyn Harper wasn't for sale, and if I was going to stay with her, I'd have to figure out who I really was and what I was willing to fight for. I wish I could say that after that day at the Harper estate, life went back to normal, but normal was the last thing on my mind, and I'm pretty sure it was the last thing on anyone else's mind too. The very next morning, I walked onto campus and immediately felt it. The stares, the whispers, the knowing glances. I passed a group of students outside the cafeteria, and I swear I could hear snippets of conversation, like echoes bouncing off walls. Did you hear about Liam and Evelyn? Her parents offered him everything, and she tore it up. I wanted to disappear. I wanted to sink into the floor and pretend none of it had happened. But Evelyn was right beside me, her hand slipping into mine, grounding me. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked with me, shoulders back, eyes forward, like she owned the world. And in a weird way, I felt like maybe we did. Just not the kind of world we expected. Classes resumed, but everything felt heightened. Every interaction was loaded with unspoken assumptions. Professors who never looked twice now gave me curious glances, as if wondering what kind of kid had the audacity to defy the Harper dynasty. Friends tried to act casual, but I could see the judgment lurking behind their smiles. Some were supportive, most were fascinated, or jealous. I wasn't sure which hurt more. Money was another constant shadow over my shoulder. College wasn't cheap, and my parents were scraping together what they could. The Harper offer had dangled in front of me like a lifeline I couldn't take. I felt a knot in my stomach every time I walked past the financial aid office, knowing that tuition still loomed over me like a storm cloud. And yet, every time I looked at Evelyn, every time I saw the fire in her eyes, I remembered why I couldn't take it. Why I wouldn't. It wasn't easy. Charles and Margaret Harper didn't just give up because Evelyn had said, "I'm not for sale." No, they were subtle, precise. Opportunities that had once seemed open began to close. Networking events I'd been invited to suddenly didn't exist. Professors who had spoken highly of me were suddenly unavailable for guidance. Invitations I had relied on to pad my resume were quietly rescinded. It was like they were testing us, pressing us from every angle to see how far we'd bend. And yet, Evelyn didn't bend. She didn't flinch. We found our own moments of escape, little bubbles of normalcy in the chaos. Lunches under the oak tree behind the library, late night walks when the campus was quiet, the world muffled in the soft glow of streetlights, study sessions that turned into laughter sessions. Her hair falling into her eyes as she teased me for getting the answer wrong, the way she always did. Every stolen smile, every quiet joke, every touch reminded me why the Harper family's manipulations meant nothing. But even in those moments, the whispers followed us. People would ask, casually, almost casually, about how I could resist the offer, how Evelyn could possibly reject all that money. And there I was, smiling, nodding, playing it cool, while inside, I wrestled with my own insecurities. Could I really make it on my own? Would I survive the financial stress without compromise? One day, Evelyn and I were sitting on the library steps, the autumn air crisp around us. I finally let my frustration slip. "I don't know how much longer I can do this," I admitted, voice low. "Everything feels like it's closing in. I keep thinking, maybe I should have just..." I stopped, shaking my head. She put a finger on my lips. "Don't," she said firmly. "Don't even think that. Look at me, Liam. You're stronger than you think. You don't need their money to prove anything. You already proved the most important thing, your integrity. That's worth more than their fortune, more than their approval." I looked at her and felt something shift inside me. Not just admiration, not just love, but a fierce, protective instinct. She wasn't just Evelyn Harper, the girl who could tear up a trust fund in front of her parents. She was Evelyn Harper, the girl who had made me want to be better, stronger, braver. The social pressure didn't ease. Some days were worse than others. Invitations we never received. Subtle snubs from professors, comments from students who had always been friendly, now laced with veiled judgment. But through it all, Evelyn was constant, a rock in a sea of shifting expectations. And the more she resisted, the more I realized just how far I was willing to go for her. Just how much I had invested in this fight. One evening, after a particularly rough week, we found ourselves on the roof of the dorm building, looking out over the campus. The city lights flickered like stars, and for a moment, the world outside, her parents, the gossip, the money, felt like it didn't exist. I took her hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you," I admitted. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Then don't think about it," she said softly. "Just be here. Be present. That's all I need." And for that night, I could be. Just Liam. Just Evelyn. Just two people in love, trying to survive a world that seemed determined to test them at every turn. But I knew reality would return, harsh and unforgiving, like the chill of the autumn wind that wrapped around us on that rooftop. The Harpers were not done. They never were. And the whispers, the judgment, the pressure, it was only going to get heavier. Yet, in Evelyn's gaze, I saw the promise that made all of it worth enduring. She had chosen her values over wealth, love over convenience. And if I was going to stand by her, I had to do the same. Every whispered insult, every denied opportunity, every cold shoulder from someone we thought was a friend, it became fuel. Not anger, not resentment, but determination. Determination to survive, to prove ourselves, to endure. The tension didn't go away, and it wouldn't. But for the first time, I realized that consequences, no matter how harsh, were nothing compared to the courage it took to stay true to yourself and to love someone unconditionally, even when the world tried to break you. That was the beginning of our 9-month journey. 9 months of pressure, struggle, whispers, and judgment. 9 months that would test every part of us, every fiber of our character, every ounce of our commitment. And even though I didn't know it yet. Those 9 months were only the prologue to the storm that was coming. I thought I had a handle on the pressure before. I thought I knew what it meant to feel cornered, but I hadn't even scratched the surface. After the whispers, the stares, and the subtle snubs, Evelyn's parents decided to escalate. It started small, a cancelled internship opportunity that had been handed to me months ago. At first, I thought it was coincidence, until a fellow student, someone who usually ignored me, leaned in and said, "Funny how opportunities vanish when you're dating her." That's when I realized it wasn't coincidence. Charles Harper had eyes everywhere, and Margaret, oh, she was the quiet, more insidious one. Her influence seeped into places I never suspected. Professors who suddenly had scheduling conflicts, social groups that subtly excluded Evelyn and me from events, and even mutual friends who began acting distant. The first time I got an offer that truly tempted me, I was at a networking event for students in finance. A recruiter, someone I'd met only in passing, cornered me with a proposition. "Liam, you've got potential. We're willing to sponsor your final year and set you up with a position in our firm immediately after graduation. All we ask is that you focus fully on your career and keep personal distractions to a minimum." I froze. My pulse shot up. I knew exactly what personal distractions meant. And there it was again, the carrot dangling in front of me. No pressure from Evelyn, just a world that seemed to constantly whisper, "Take the easy route, Liam. Take what you deserve." I walked home that night with my mind spinning. Evelyn was sitting on the dorm couch when I got back, curled up in a blanket with a book. She looked up and I swear she knew immediately. "You got the offer, didn't you?" she asked softly, not accusatory, not judgmental, just aware. I sat down beside her, running a hand through my hair. "Yeah, and it's tempting," I admitted, almost in disbelief at how heavy the word felt coming out of my mouth. It could solve everything. The tuition, the pressure, the stress, but it feels wrong. I don't know what to do. Evelyn closed the book, putting it aside. She turned to me, eyes serious, steady. "Liam, you have to decide what kind of man you want to be. The world will always throw temptations your way. That's life. But it's your choice whether you take the shortcut or do the hard thing." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say that this was different, that the stakes were higher, that it wasn't just a shortcut, but a lifeline. But I couldn't. She was right. Every time I considered giving in, I saw her face. The look she had when she tore up her trust fund papers, and I knew I couldn't. Not for money, not for convenience, not for anyone. Still, it wasn't easy. Evelyn noticed the way I hesitated, the little moments when my eyes flicked toward opportunities that might make life easier. One evening, as we were walking across campus, she reached for my hand, stopping me mid-step. "Liam," she said gently but firmly, "you're struggling. I can see it. Talk to me." I shook my head, embarrassed. "I don't want to burden you. You've already done so much, staying strong through all this while I feel like I'm faltering." She cupped my face with both hands, making me look at her. "You're not faltering. You're human. But remember this, loyalty, courage, integrity. Those things matter more than money or convenience. I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to stay true." Her words hit me harder than any lecture, any pressure from her parents, any temptation. I realized in that moment how deeply I admired her, not just for her strength, but for her unwavering principles, for the clarity she had in the middle of chaos. That night, I stayed up thinking. The recruiter's offer, the whispers, the subtle manipulations, they all pressed against me like weights. I could feel myself bending, just a little, under the pressure. But Evelyn, she was the anchor that kept me grounded. The next week, the Harper family's tactics grew more sophisticated. Margaret invited one of Evelyn's closest friends to a private brunch, one that Evelyn and I weren't invited to. Later, that friend casually mentioned that Evelyn's parents had been concerned about the effect I might have on her future. It was clear. They were leveraging everyone around us, trying to isolate us, trying to make me crack. And yet, every time I thought we might be defeated, Evelyn found a way to remind me of what mattered. One afternoon, we were in the campus coffee shop, laughing over a shared pastry. She leaned in, whispering, "Let them try. We have something they can't buy, and that's us." Her smile was infectious, her confidence magnetic. For a moment, I almost forgot the weight pressing down on us. Almost. But reality was relentless. I got another tempting offer a few days later, this time from a scholarship program run by a wealthy alum. The terms were generous, almost absurdly so. There was just one catch. I would have to step away from Evelyn for at least a semester. They called it a focused academic program, but I knew exactly what it meant. I looked at Evelyn that night, sitting cross-legged on the dorm floor with a textbook in her lap. I opened my mouth, ready to speak, and then closed it. How could I even say it? How could I explain that money, opportunity, convenience, they were tempting me in a way that made me question everything I thought I knew about myself? Evelyn looked up, catching my hesitation. "Liam," she said quietly, "whatever you're thinking, don't let them get to you. Don't let anyone get to you. I believe in you, and if you believe in us, we'll get through this." Her faith in me hit me like a tidal wave. I felt something inside me settle, a clarity I hadn't had in weeks. I realized that I didn't need validation from anyone. Not money, not status, not even her parents. What I needed was to stand by her, to stay loyal, to trust that we were stronger together than apart. I took her hand, holding it tightly. "You're right," I said. I I won't let anyone, not them, not the world, break this. Us. She smiled, leaning her head on my shoulder. That's all I needed to hear. And in that moment, despite the tension, despite the manipulations, despite the temptations that threatened to shake me, I recommitted. I recommitted to Evelyn, to our relationship, and to the values that mattered. I realized that no offer, no pressure, no opportunity would ever be worth compromising what we had. Her courage inspired me, her integrity emboldened me, and her love, well, it reminded me that sometimes the hardest choice is also the right one. The Harper family was relentless. The whispers, the pressures, the subtle manipulations, they wouldn't stop. But Evelyn and I had weathered the first real storm together, and I knew somehow we'd survive whatever came next. That night, lying beside her in the quiet of our dorm, I realized something profound. Love wasn't about avoiding temptation. It was about facing it together and choosing each other every single time. And we had chosen. I wish I could say that after months of subtle manipulations and temptations, Evelyn and I finally felt safe, that we could exhale, let the storm pass, and just be. But life has a way of delivering a different kind of chaos when you least expect it. It started with whispers, rumors, just small, harmless whispers at first. A friend passing a comment in the cafeteria. Did you hear about Charles Harper? Something about the IRS. Then another, more insistent. I heard they're investigating him for tax fraud. My stomach sank every time I heard it. Evelyn noticed my tension immediately. She always did. Don't jump to conclusions, she said softly that evening as we walked across campus, the autumn leaves crunching under our feet. Her hand was tucked into mine, warm, grounding. But we need to be prepared. Be aware, but don't let it consume you. The rumors, however, weren't rumors for long. A few days later, the campus newsfeed carried the first official confirmation. Charles Harper under federal investigation for tax evasion and financial misconduct. My chest tightened. Evelyn froze, reading it on her phone, lips pressed together. We spent that afternoon on her dorm balcony, overlooking the city, both of us silent. The Harper empire, the foundation of her family's wealth and influence, was cracking. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Evelyn. Not about her love for me, but about the world she had been raised in, the world that had tried to buy and manipulate everything. The next few weeks were a blur of media reports, campus gossip, and people trying to glean every detail about Evelyn and me. Friends who once greeted us warmly now gave distant smiles. Some whispered behind our backs, speculating how the scandal might affect Evelyn's life. And mine. A few even tried to use it as a wedge between us. But Evelyn, she was unshakable. One evening, after yet another awkward encounter where a group of students subtly implied we might benefit from the Harper family collapse, I admitted my frustration. It's exhausting, Evelyn. Everywhere we turn, people are staring, whispering. I feel like we're on display. Like any misstep will be judged 10 times harder because of your family. She turned to me, her eyes steady and unwavering. Liam, listen. The world will always judge. People will always speculate. But none of that matters if we hold onto our values. Money, status, power, they're illusions. Integrity and love, those are real. Her words, simple and direct, struck me harder than any gossip or subtle manipulation ever could. She had weathered months of parental pressure, societal judgment, and moral tests, and she remained steadfast. And somehow, she was reminding me that my own integrity, my choices, were just as important. Charles and Margaret Harper, of course, did not sit quietly as the news broke. The scrutiny from authorities only made their interference more desperate, more visible. Invitations I had previously been denied began to reappear, but with strings attached. People we had considered friends subtly distanced themselves, wary of aligning too closely with a family under investigation. It was like walking through a minefield, not knowing which step would trigger a public scandal. Evelyn, however, handled it with a grace that left me in awe. She didn't lash out at her parents publicly. She didn't complain to anyone. Instead, she focused on what mattered. Our studies, our future, our relationship. One night, after a particularly tense day, she sat me down in our dorm room, holding both my hands in hers. Liam, she said, voice calm, I know this is hard. The world sees my family and assumes it defines me, assumes it defines us. But it doesn't. None of that matters. Our life, our choices, our love, that's ours. Let's not let their mistakes or their power control how we live. I felt a mix of relief and admiration. Relief that I wasn't alone in processing the chaos. Admiration because she wasn't just speaking words. She was living them. Evelyn Harper, the girl who had refused to sell herself, who had stood up to her parents, who had inspired me to resist temptation, was now showing me how to navigate a collapsing world with dignity. The pressure and scrutiny did not lessen, but something shifted in us. We stopped focusing on what others might think, on what the Harper Empire meant, and started focusing on what we meant to each other. Late night walks turned into deep conversations about dreams and values. Coffee shop study sessions turned into debates about right and wrong, justice and love. Every small moment reminded me that while the world tried to measure our worth in wealth and influence, our worth was being built in courage, honesty, and loyalty. And yet, there was an edge to all of this. The Harper family's influence was crumbling, but it wasn't gone. Charles Harper's investigation was ongoing, and the media was relentless. Every time a new article appeared, every time a new detail emerged about offshore accounts or shady dealings, a wave of anxiety hit Evelyn and by extension, me. It was a constant reminder that while we were free from their manipulations in principle, the consequences of their actions still lingered. One particularly cold evening, Evelyn and I walked along the river, city lights reflecting off the water. I broke the silence. Do you ever think about what happens if this all falls apart? Not us, I mean your family? The investigation? The scandal? She looked at me, eyes fierce and clear. Of course I do, but Liam, that's their world, not ours. We can't control what they did, what they hid, or what comes next. But we can control what we do, how we react, and the love we give each other. That's the only part that matters. Her words felt like armor, like a shield against all the judgment, the whispers, the societal pressure. And for the first time, I truly understood what she had meant months ago when she said she wasn't for sale. Her principles weren't just a moral stance, they were a survival tool, a guide for navigating a world full of temptation and corruption. It became clearer with each passing day that the Harper family's power was crumbling. Their carefully curated image of control and influence was dissolving under scrutiny. Invitations that once carried weight now felt hollow. Weren't just a moral stance, they were a survival tool, a guide for navigating a world full of temptation and corruption. It became clearer with each passing day that the Harper family's power was crumbling. Their carefully curated image of control and influence was dissolving under scrutiny. Invitations that once carried weight now felt hollow. Students and acquaintances who had once revered them now questioned everything. And through it all, Evelyn's independence shone brighter. She wasn't defined by their wealth, their influence, or their reputation. She was Evelyn Harper, strong, principled, uncompromising. For me, it was both terrifying and inspiring. I had spent months struggling with my loyalty, my ambition, my fears. Now, watching Evelyn navigate the chaos with clarity and courage, I realized that the true measure of power wasn't wealth or status. It was integrity. It was staying true to yourself, even when everything around you tried to bend you. By the time the first snow fell that winter, covering the campus in a blanket of white, I felt a shift in our relation. Principled, uncompromising. For me, it was both. Now, watching Evelyn navigate the chaos with clarity and courage, I realized that the true measure of power wasn't wealth or status. It was integrity. It was staying true. Everything around you tried to bend you. By the time the first snow fell that winter, covering the campus in a blanket of white, I felt a shift in our relationship. The rumors, the whispers, the parental interference, they still existed, but they had lost their hold on us. We had learned to navigate a world that constantly tried to sway us with fear and temptation. And in that process, our bond had grown stronger, forged in resilience and mutual respect. I didn't know what the future held. Charles Harper's investigation was ongoing and the world was unpredictable. But for the first time in months, I wasn't consumed by worry, by temptation, or by guilt. I was focused on what truly mattered: Evelyn, our love, and the choices we made together. And in that clarity, I realized something vital. The Harper empire might crumble, their wealth might falter, and their influence might collapse. But Evelyn's courage, integrity, and independence would endure. And for me, standing beside her, that was all I needed. The morning Charles Harper was arrested is a day I'll never forget. I woke up to my phone buzzing relentlessly. News alerts, texts, notifications, all of them screaming the same thing. Charles Harper, CEO and philanthropist, taken into federal custody for tax evasion and financial fraud. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. My chest tightened. My mind raced, and a strange mix of relief, vindication, and disbelief washed over me. Evelyn stirred beside me, rubbing her eyes. When she saw the headlines on my phone, her hand shot out, gripping mine. "They did it," I whispered, barely believing it myself. Her eyes met mine, steady, unwavering. "Justice," she said softly. Finally, the days that followed were surreal. The media descended on the Harper estate like a storm. Reporters, cameras, news vans, everyone wanted a piece of the story. Evelyn and I were caught in the middle, not by choice, but by circumstance. Friends who had previously judged us now approached cautiously, curious, some even apologetic for how they had treated us during the months of rumor and scrutiny. But through it all, Evelyn remained calm, composed, unshaken. She didn't gloat. She didn't relish the downfall of her parents. Instead, she focused on the present, on the things that actually mattered: us, our integrity, and our future. The collapse of the Harper family's power was complete. Their wealth, carefully curated and leveraged for influence, was tied up in investigations, legal battles, and frozen assets. The social snubs, the manipulation, the subtle pressures, they had lost their foundation. And with that, Evelyn and I were free. Free from whispers, free from judgment, free from the shadow of a fortune that had tried to buy everything. Walking across campus that afternoon, hand in hand, I realized how light I felt. For the first time in months, maybe years, it felt like the world was ours. Not because of money, not because of status, but because we had chosen each other and had stayed true. Evelyn squeezed my hand as if reading my thoughts. "It's over," she said, "all of it." I nodded, feeling a lump in my throat. It wasn't just over in the legal sense, it was over in every sense that mattered. We had survived the pressure, the temptation, the whispers, and the manipulation. And we had emerged stronger together. That evening, we found ourselves sitting on the roof of our dorm, just like we had so many nights before, but now under a sky that felt infinitely clearer, infinite in its possibilities. I looked at Evelyn and felt a wave of gratitude and awe. She had refused to sell herself, refused to bend to anyone's will, and in doing so, she had shown me the true value of love, courage, and integrity. You know, I said quietly, there were moments when I wondered if I'd fail, moments when I thought maybe I'd cave, maybe I'd take the easy way out. And every time you reminded me why I couldn't. Evelyn leaned against me, head resting on my shoulder. You didn't fail, Liam. You chose what mattered, and that's why we're here. I reflected on the months we had endured, the tension, the tests, the temptations. They had been relentless, but I realized that without them, I might never have understood the depth of my own values, the strength of my loyalty, or the power of love that is untainted by money or status. The Harper family's downfall wasn't the point. It was the backdrop, the crucible in which our bond had been tested and forged. And through it all, Evelyn's courage had been the constant guiding light. Later that night, as the campus settled into quiet, I sat alone for a while, thinking. I thought about what it meant to truly choose integrity over convenience, love over money, and personal growth over social validation. I thought about how easy it would have been to take the Harper offer, to walk away with a clear financial path, and yet how hollow that victory would have felt. And then I thought about Evelyn, tearing up those papers, standing firm, showing me and everyone that some things are priceless, that love, integrity, and self-respect outweigh any fortune or influence. When I returned to our room, Evelyn was waiting with a soft smile. You've been thinking again, she teased. I laughed softly, feeling lighter than I had in months, just realizing how lucky I am and how much I've learned from you, from us, from everything. She took my hand, squeezing it gently. We learned together. That's what matters. We sat there in silence for a while, letting the quiet wash over us. The world outside could continue with its chaos, but inside that room, inside that moment, there was peace, freedom, and the satisfaction that we had chosen right, even when it was hard, even when no one else would have understood. The Harper empire would crumble, but Evelyn's independence and courage would remain. Our love would remain. And for the first time in months, I felt the full weight of a future built not on money, manipulation, or social status, but on choices, integrity, and a love that had been tested and proven unbreakable. Looking at Evelyn, I whispered, almost to myself, we made it. She smiled, leaning in closer. We always will. And in that moment, I knew she was right. Whatever came next, whatever challenges or temptations the future might bring, we had learned the most important lesson, that staying true to yourself, staying loyal to love, and choosing integrity above all else is the only victory that truly matters. The Harper family had lost their power, their fortune, their control, but we had gained something far greater, ourselves, our love, and the certainty that we would never be for sale, and neither would the life we were building together. And for the first time, I didn't fear the future. I embraced it, because some victories aren't measured in money, status, or influence. They're measured in courage, in loyalty, and in love that refuses to be compromised. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.